Looks like we do have at least one individual online. Mr. Scarrow's online. If we were 11:30, so if you want to call the meeting in order.
Sorry. Okay, yes, Mr. Tadlock, can you call roll call, please?
Yes, Julian Ingersoll.
Here.
Adam Andre.
Here.
Ed Scarrow.
Here.
I will also note that Kevin Gayhart is also present as a non-committee member.
Great. So the first item on the agenda is the public participation at board meetings, policy 187.
Okay.
Yeah, go ahead.
Yeah, this policy was tabled at a prior board meeting and referred back to the policy committee again. I think as people had time to ruminate and think about it. Wanted reviewed here again for the discussion. The blue language is what the proposed changes were, and then you see the strike language. We did not modify or change, just sent back to the committee for discussion.
Yeah, I know one reason why I didn't want it, or I wanted it sent back to committee is because I really personally just wanted to express my, having given it a lot more thought and getting more feedback from people in the community as well as other board members. I personally just feel like we don't need to make a change to the
And I've thought a lot about it too, and I'm on the same page with Julia. Is that I think we can just drop it. And if it gets out of control or out of hand in the future, we can always go back and revisit it, and we can start with this as a first draft if we choose to do so. So I know I'm the one that brought this whole thing up, and so I'm saying to you that I think we just want to leave it as is and move on.
Yeah, and I think it was a good idea to have that discussion, Ed. And talk through it. Personally, I just think at the time we were probably being more reactionary than is this a really a policy that needs to be modified, and do we need to change it? So I'm glad that we all took the time to talk it through and think about it, and how do you feel, Adam?
I agree with both of you. I'm glad that we did go through the exercise and have conversations.
Yeah.
I think the steps that the board took previously to make it a little bit more organized with the card where they register and put that forward, I think that was good. I think the discussion opportunity was helpful as well. I mean, it's probably a topic that people on both ends of the spectrum are all in agreement on, that not to change it. That's a little bit of feedback that I've heard back from people. So.
Yeah.
All right.
Did you have any comment on it?
Not at this time.
Okay.
Yeah, the new system. I like the new system, and you have the discretion.
Yeah.
I know it says order, but
I do like the card system as well. I think it's worked well, and it's kept things moving forward. So
I like it.
Do you have to sign a card to be in the room?
To be in the room?
Like if you're gonna come and sit in the audience, do you have to, when you sign in or anything, or can you just sit in the audience?
You're asked
to sign in.
But
It's not a requirement.
It just helps with the minutes.
Okay.
Yeah, I think you brought it because there's been a few times where, there's someone saying we just don't know who they are.
Yeah, we don't know who they are.
I guess that's right, but
Yeah.
it's more out of curiosity.
Yeah.
All right. Probably someone taking a class.
Yeah, and anybody's welcome to attend the meeting. It's a public meeting, so
All right.
Okay, Act 95. Is this something? I remember seeing something like about this from WASB, but
well, I'll turn it over to Sarah to give the background. She can articulate it better. She's the one who worked on this and had that oversight as it's related to the new admissions guarantees that were passed by the state legislature this last session.
Right. So this is just in response to the law that was passed that says that any kid who doesn't graduate, who at the end of their junior year is top 5 or 10% in the state of Wisconsin, or in their school district, the state of Wisconsin university system will automatically admit them into their schools. So, and it's strictly based on GPA. It's not based on anything else, like no honor points or anything like that. When I went through the webinar about the law and what we needed to do, they told us that we have to come up with our own local tiebreaker for what that's going to look like to determine the top 5 and 10%. Top 5%
Oh, I was wondering
UW-Madison.
what the tiebreaker was for. I'm like, oh,
Exactly.
you're guaranteed what,
Well,
but now I understand.
top 5% get into UW-Madison
Yeah.
automatically, and then top 10% get into the other UW schools automatically. So the frustrating piece to this is like we've worked very hard to look at the whole
Right.
child and
Right.
creating a Law-Day system, and so to have something like this that we have to use, but I keep reminding myself that like this is just about admission.
Right,
And also top 5 and 10% would probably automatically get it anyway. So
yeah.
what we need to do logistically is make sure that this is located on the transcript. So I've been working with Lena, and Lena has gone through and figured out a way to say top 5% or top 10% after junior year. That's what it will say on the student's transcript, so that when the students go to apply to
Okay.
the schools, the admissions office has that kind of flag, if that makes sense. We didn't want to put like a ranking on there necessarily, because sometimes if we did that for all kids, that could look bad for some kids.
Sure.
Right? And
Sure.
so we wanted to highlight the kids that have the top 5 and 10% and not draw attention, so to speak, to other students, if that makes sense.
Yep.
So, according to the webinar, they suggested that we use mathematical calculations to figure out tiebreakers for that top 5 and 10%. And so we went to 5 decimal places, hoping that hopefully we don't have any ties after that point. If it does come to a further tie resolution, then we said we would look at Law-Day and look at the honor points as a tiebreaker. Because the law says specifically that it should be based on GPA, so we should keep it on GPA as much as possible. The charter schools don't have honor points, so we have that second bullet there underneath further tie resolution to go out 6 decimal places.
Okay.
So
That's the recommendation. Now, if the, I know this might upset some, but Sarah and I discussed this. I asked her to go back to the high school team and see what their thoughts were. They obviously didn't like my idea. But theoretically, the way the law is written, and it's based off the GPA, and we know that GPA is not that #1 determining factor on our Law-Day system.
Right.
And so we could have a student who takes very highly rigorous courses and ends up with a 3.4 GPA and would be nowhere in this discussion. And we could have kids who take relatively easy courses and have a 4.0, but now we'll have automatic admittance into UW-Madison. One could make the argument that one is less prepared than the other, but you're basing it on GPA. The way the law is, it does not say how many decimal places you have to go out on the rounding before using the tiebreaker. I jokingly said we could just go to the ones place value, or the 10th. You could go 1 decimal place.
Sure.
And then kick in the tiebreaker. That's not as easy on the programming within Skyward, because then you'd have a lot of tiebreakers,
Sure.
because you'd have a lot of kids with a 3.4.
Yep.
Or 3.5, whatever that cut is, I don't know what it is. Then you would have to go to the honor point and you would be using that tiebreaker a lot sooner. So my guess is the recommendation was based on more of an automation desire than reflective of our system. But either way, a high GPA and a high honor point student is likely going to get in. It's just not necessarily an automatic.
Yeah, and this is just automatic, you get in, but you still have to apply, you still
Yeah.
have to go through all of the hoops.
Yep.
It's not the guaranteed
Yeah.
admission, which is something different.
Correct.
Right,
So,
it doesn't guarantee you into the college that you want either,
Right.
just
Yeah,
because you
so-
get it.
yeah.
You get into the UW system.
Right.
And we have to remember that this is the state's law, we didn't create this.
Correct.
You know, this is not something that we advocated for or promoted or whatever. It's-
Yeah, we don't have top 5% students complaining because they're not getting in.
No,
Yeah.
that's exactly it.
That I've heard or had that feedback. And top 10% are into any UW school.
Yeah,
Top
I was just
10%
gonna
Get
say.
into all of them that they want to do.
Yep.
You're talking, it's our top 30 students in the top 10%.
Yep.
So,
Yeah, all of those kids are probably in the, you know, with the lottie points, they're probably, you know, getting those scholarships and.
That's
So,
what I had
yeah.
to talk myself off the
Yeah.
ledge a little bit, because I was like, I
Yeah.
can't believe they're doing this and basing it only on GPA,
Yeah.
but I'm like, okay,
Yeah,
realistically, here's how this is gonna play out.
I
Yeah.
think their perspective is probably trying to keep the talent in the state by just making the process a little bit easier,
Yeah,
perhaps,
Yeah.
from the student perspective, but
I think it was just to score some political points.
yeah,
That's why they-
honestly, it's kind of a silly law, in my opinion, but.
students are gonna go where they're gonna go. And, meaning,
Yeah, I agree,
Universities
it was kind of a
continue to
dog,
drop their
and I think that was WASB's
assessments anyway,
position
so.
too, that they felt like this was just an unnecessary thing, that they didn't understand why they were doing it.
I know DPI was
About
also
80%.
upset too, because they weren't consulted in the writing of the law, so. When I was watching them.
What's the early action deadline? How early is that?
Like for this, you mean?
Yeah, cause you have to
Well, it's end of your junior.
Yeah,
Right,
yeah,
that's when you have to
yeah.
apply as a
Yeah.
junior year.
Yeah,
Yeah,
Yep,
so August 1st, basically.
yep,
Yeah,
On or before.
It might give peace of mind to some kids that they know, okay, I'm at
Yeah.
that point, that
mhm,
I'm guaranteed
now they're going to-
admitted to the university.
mhm.
Alright, for that reason
So,
though,
yeah, so
I'm
what
not
do we
opposed to the language as it
Do,
is.
so then do we have to like send this to the board and the board has to approve it?
Yeah.
Okay, so we have a choice as a board to adopt it or not, or?
The
No,
tiebreaker.
the tiebreaker.
Oh,
We have local control on the tiebreaker, but Act 95, the law that we have to do
oh, I was
this.
gonna
Yeah.
say, if it's an Act
Yeah.
95, it's gotta be, it's a.
Right,
Correct,
Okay,
Yep.
it's just on the tiebreaker,
it's just on the tiebreaker.
yeah, so this policy is really just speaking to tiebreaker.
got it, well. Yeah, I mean, I'm fine with what you guys propose, it's. Makes sense.
And not all three of our high schools use on the lottery system or honor point. Current
Right.
college candidate doesn't use it anyways.
Right,
Alright. Very good. We'll take that to the board for a full first reading.
okay,
And then Adam had asked to add a cell phone discussion to the
Yep.
agenda.
Yeah, I'm such a tricky one, right? But the more I read and the more things that come out and studies and data, everybody's saying that there's so many good things about having a cell phone, I'll call it a ban, although that's a bad word. Limited use, whatever, you know, and seeing all this data, we can't ignore it.
state of Virginia just passed a cell phone ban for the kids. All public schools in Virginia, no more cell phones.
That's, I mean, in my opinion, that's awesome. The thing that I keep thinking about is how I would think that from a distraction standpoint, obviously, that's really, that's front of mind, but there's so many things saying that mental health is getting
Right.
better. There's less
Right.
bullying in schools,
Right.
all these other things, and I can't ignore that.
Well, and I haven't seen any studies to show that having the cell phones is a positive thing.
Right, sure, yeah. Yeah.
You know, like that it's actually,
Except
Helping.
the parents want to get in touch with their kids all the time.
So where we left it in the handbook is that basically it's a ban at the middle school in the sense that they can bring it to school, but they have to leave it in their locker. They're not supposed to have it on their person.
Right.
At the high school level, they can have it out when directed by the teacher or at the lunchtime or the passing time.
Yeah.
And we still need to look at getting where we left it was we were going to get the cell phone bags for violators. And so I'm still in that process.
Okay.
Working on that.
Yeah,
And they kind of looked at that as being kind of like a pilot on that
Mhm.
aspect.
yep,
If the board wanted to go further and do at the high school, the same guidelines at the middle school, we'll probably want to order more bags, but I don't know if we want to go, because they did adopt that or modified some of the language on that, and I know plan to clamp down harder, and that was what they
Well,
wanted, was
and
that
I-
support for how do we handle those repeat offenders or.
yeah, I think that's kind of where we left the discussion, was that there needs to be better enforcement of it, and that the language was kind of there that we wanted, but there needs to be a consistent enforcement of it and better enforcement.
Yeah.
That is on the agenda for in-service.
Ah.
So
And
like
I
how
saw
your cell phones
another-
are out right now, we shouldn't see that anymore in the classroom,
Right,
is what I'm saying.
yep,
Like, do you know what I mean? Like that's,
yep,
I mean, I'm not saying you shouldn't have that right now,
Yeah.
but like that should be the change that we see
Yep.
unless they're allowed to use them.
right,
And I saw another lengthy interview from a gentleman, he was a university professor, and he did a lot of the study, and cell phone was one of the components on the, I think it was item number 3 that he talked about with the mental health crisis and so forth, but right at the top of that was the early creation of social media accounts and so forth.
Yeah.
And I don't want us to be, what I struggle with, because part of me, it just thinks, and this was a conversation we had at the very front end when the technology was coming out, was, well, gee, it's relatively easy to just say, no, we're not going there, put that away, don't have it. And part of me struggles with the, where do you teach the responsibility, appropriate use, cyber
yeah,
security and that type of use, but that's kind of what he had talked about, was that until we as a society get more parents to get in line and get uniform on, no, you don't get to have an Instagram or a Facebook account until you're age 16. That was his recommendation.
yeah,
Is not before age 16. And a
Yeah.
lot of this mental health crisis, the distraction, and what's taken place is because you're having them open it at, what is it, age 13? They're
13.
supposed to be.
Yeah.
And that's if
yeah,
they're
but
not lying about their age
exactly,
when they create it. And so I think there's a number of pieces. I guess the point I'm getting to is my concern is if we don't take advantage of any teaching and learning opportunity while in school on the appropriate use, what's to prevent that outside of school and that component to that supervision piece? But, my wife is very, she tells me as a teacher, she's like, well, if I ever look at another job anywhere else, my first question I'll ask is, what's your cell phone policy?
We've gotten that.
How do you handle that? How do you address it? Because her being a middle school teacher, she doesn't want to, she wants to be supported on that restriction and not deal with that distraction there.
yeah,
In that age level, because it's very disruptive, especially at that younger age and that lack of maturity. So I don't know, it's a good question, and I think from a societal standpoint, we really need to look at that overall, and I wish we could just fix it within the school and that issue go away. I know it won't. But that doesn't mean that we should try to do things and try to work harder on that.
High school, they can have the phone on them, not supposed to have it on the classroom, but then like in the hallway in between classes that are allowed to use them and whatnot.
That's what we have in the.
That's what's right
Right
there,
now,
yeah.
Unless they're using it for an educational reason in class,
Sure.
like the teacher says.
Yeah, I mean, that policy as written, in my opinion, is good. which, like
It
you said,
will
we
be
just
the
need, we
enforcement.
just need the enforcement. But then how do you become that teacher that's, oh, I gotta go to Mrs. Ingersoll's class, I can't use my phone, and then how do we support the teachers, you know,
They,
to enforce it?
the teachers who are consistent don't have an issue with it. If you said
Okay,
consistent expectations, the
Yeah.
kids
Yep.
will
Yep.
adapt and modify their behavioral expectations.
Yep.
As a principal, the kids that I would have bounced down to me were typically from classrooms where the teacher was inconsistent.
got it.
And it was, you know, they tolerate it, allow it one day, and then whatever day, Wednesday, they decide I'm gonna clamp down now.
Yeah.
But I don't know,
Yeah, that
Sarah,
doesn't
you
work
could
in
probably
parenting
speak to
or
that better.
Right? Oh my God.
Is that fair to say or accurate,
Yeah,
that I mean,
yeah.
there's,
The kids know where they can use it and where they can't use it, and now basically, by saying we don't want these out at all, unless it's okay with, for an educational reason.
Yeah.
That does give some of those teachers who are unwilling to fight that fight, for lack of a better
Yeah.
way of describing it, the power,
Mhm.
they feel
Yep.
empowered that they can say, yeah, put it away, you know, now, if you take it out, it becomes an infraction that has to be dealt with, you
Yeah.
know, versus it's just a me thing that I have to deal with.
and I think the bag psychologically is going to pay dividends, because the power struggle, I think a lot of teachers feared, was the taking away
Yeah,
of the, because kids get irrational, like, we've seen them we had a kid make physical contact with a substitute teacher because to take the phone away. And,
We're talking about adult size students. Like,
Yeah,
Yeah.
you
exactly.
know, like,
Yeah.
yeah.
but when it's phones going in your bag, or, you know,
Yeah.
bag in the phone, go ahead, keep the phone, but it's sitting in
Right.
your bag and it's locked up and you can't get it undone until you leave school. I think that will make it, I think that'll be a useful tool.
Yeah.
I'm excited to see how that will work.
The volume should be on while it's in there so they can hear the messages coming in. So not everyone-
That's just.
That's a very evil thought.
Oh, man, that'd be torture.
Wouldn't that be tough? I know, yeah.
So I don't know if you can pull up that policy, how we,
It's in the handbook.
yeah. Cause I know we made some minor changes to it, didn't we?
Yep.
Yeah.
Sarah, when's that in service that you guys,
August,
August?
it will probably be the second day of in service that we'll talk about it. But I
Yeah.
don't have
Yeah.
a schedule made yet, so
No,
don't quote me.
I'm just wondering what
Yeah.
general month.
And I know that, you know, obviously we're here to write
Scroll
a
down a
policy
bit,
for the
Jason.
district, but
What?
I think
Scroll
the
down.
education over parents.
Agreed.
Needs to go on hand in hand.
Yes.
I agree.
And
there.
young, like fourth and fifth grade parents through middle school, where
Yeah.
I feel like that's where we still have
There
a
you go.
chance to turn the tide a little bit.
Yeah.
As they're contemplating this first purchase and.
I mean, is that something that we can have,
It's under the technology.
I think it's about
Section.
finding the right speaker, the right venue.
right,
You know, we've had things really well attended and we've had other offerings that are not well attended, like if there's a way to work it in, I don't
Well,
know,
you know
during a
how we have-
conference evening or, you know, where
Yeah, I
you
was
can
just gonna
segue
say-
over and for 20 minutes, join in on this.
yeah, I mean, we require, parents to attend the sports, meetings
Mhm.
every term or whatever
Yeah.
it is. You know, maybe we incorporate something like that.
Yeah.
But,
I'll give it some thought. I'll
Yeah.
talk to Emily too, because, yeah.
Yeah.
The counselor, you know,
Yeah,
just kind
that's-
of figuring out the right place to place it so that we
Right.
can get 50 to 100 people in for that session.
right.
Yeah.
Okay, so, is there anything in here that states what the consequence is? Or
That's a good question.
like
Let's see.
with the bags or
Yes.
anything?
Cell phone restrictions will,
We have additional consequences.
Student placement.
Okay, so we left it,
After the-
we just left
after
it
the
kind of
initial.
open-ended with the additional.
After the first referral, then it could be. That way we could look into the bag situation and
Yeah.
see if that would work out, and that left it open.
Sure.
I mean, I can't see more than, how long do you lose it for the day? And then I can't see more than a handful of bags being needed, you know, for habitual offenders, or is it that bad?
I don't know.
How many did you order?
I'll have to ask the high school and get the quote, how many bags they think they'll need.
Okay.
Oh, man.
We need to.
Number will go down.
Anytime you
Go
start
back up.
something
Yeah.
like this, it will start off high.
Yeah,
And
Okay,
then once it circulates through
Yeah.
that, yeah, they're gonna do this,
yeah,
then that's when it'll taper off, but
yeah.
yeah.
Well, and what are the thoughts? It's bagged in the office, or it's bagged and they're carrying it around?
I don't know, we
The-
haven't
Part of
talked
the
about,
letter.
Well, there's no
Start
point in
letter.
bagging it to put it in the office.
right. It
If
was
we
more
can do
of
the
a-
bags, it's
Right.
because it's designed for the student to keep it.
Yeah,
And so then does it automatically unlock at the end of the school day, or
They
is,
have
they have to
there's a
come?
device, they would have to
They have
go
to
by
go-
and
oh,
Got
that's, yeah, that's even better.
swipe it. yeah.
Go out of your
Okay.
way.
And then it would unlock it, make sure the
Okay.
bag.
Okay,
That's my understanding of how it works.
Which we would want in the office.
When we looked for, I believe the cost,
said
Ryan
back.
looked up the price point, to do a whole school, it was around $50,000.
Yeah.
but We wouldn't get that many unlock
Yeah.
areas, you're on restriction, you gotta go through the office, so what I'd like to do is
Mhm.
you get one, and, you know, maybe start with 20 to 50 bags, whatever you do.
yeah,
Make a wait line to, you know, at the end of the day, to scan your bag or whatever.
yeah.
on their pouch.
Yeah. No, I have been very intrigued by a number of those
Yep.
reports and studies,
Yeah.
even the comments from the kids. On the fact that just not having it
Mhm.
around or being able to, that after they adjusted to it. that
Yeah,
Then there's no social pressure
felt
beyond
it
it in the
was-
classroom, like, you know, we all can't use it, we're all in the same
Correct.
boat.
Yeah.
Let's find something else to do.
I think
Like
letting this go in beta for a year and just
Yeah.
see how this like works.
Yep.
And then
yep,
bring the discussion up again, you know, and how is it working? Is it not working? Do we need to be more strict about it where they're not even allowed to be on your person, like, or does this solve the problem?
Yeah.
You know,
I think getting the students involved in that decision making too, it might surprise you that they might be advocates for the student.
you know, and that's
leadership.
something, you know,
Mhm.
maybe we get the student council involved in that.
yeah,
And I mean, that's kind of what their role is for student council is
Yeah.
to,
Great idea.
Any other thoughts or discussion?
no,
on
I
that?
mean, I like the idea of using the bags for a year, see how that works, see how kids adjust to it.
It's great.
You know, and then reevaluate.
And it is, they should be silenced and out of sight,
Yep.
unless directed by the teacher.
Yep.
So they shouldn't be
Out.
out and about.
I do
All
think,
the classes do have
Okay,
those
right.
caddies on the door where they can put it in that when they go in.
I do think that because probably the vast majority of parents don't read the handbook from year to year
Mhm.
to see what the changes are.
all 300 pages or whatever it is.
I do think that we should probably do some kind of a mass email to everybody saying, just wanna make you aware that there have been some changes made to the high school
Mhm.
cell phone use policy. Please read it and understand it and talk to your student about it.
And the middle school, yeah, let me see when
Thought
we
of that up
can,
front.
let me see when we can get the bags in, because
Yeah.
I'd like to do it as like a Loom video or a video
Yeah.
where they can show
Yep,
the students and the families, like a little YouTube video. that we
yep,
can
I
push
like
out.
that.
I think explaining to the parents the why, obviously.
Yep,
To keep students more engaged, yep. They say
and
that
just the massive
yeah.
amount of studies that have
Can cite some of the
that are
studies.
being done that prove that
Yeah.
there's, you know, better attention in the classroom, you know, less bullying, you know, cite all the positives, and we're gonna beta test this for a year and reevaluate.
With that company, does that have any kind of results, data? Is there a measurable with this at all, do you think that we can
I don't know, I'll have to look into that more.
We're
I'm just saying
already-
anecdotal reports right
Yeah.
now.
Yeah, it would have to be that, because
Yeah,
we're not giving kids referrals for cell phones right now.
yeah,
You know what I mean? So
Yeah,
we
yeah,
can't even
yeah.
like look at our data, so,
Mm-hmm.
fair.
yeah. But we would have people's reports of how it is, so.
Sure. I did tell my daughter I was gonna name this the Emmeline policy. So that everybody knows it's her fault.
We can put it after high school and, please, if you
The
like.
Emmeline Bono.
How does she feel about
She hasn't talked to me since.
that? All right.
Okay, I guess we need to adjourn to the closed session.
Yeah.
Thanks for coming, Kevin. Good seeing you.
Good to see you.
Yeah.
Good to see you, take care. Hey, Ed, I'll send you a Google Meet for the closed session.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah, bye.
Oh, good. I was gonna ask you.
So do you need me to read this?
Oh, I guess.
I
what
moved to
that
it.
stuff is.
To adjourn to a contemplated closed session pursuant to Wisconsin State Statute 19.85. One,